I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, our continuing JBS coverage of the intense public debate over the Iran nuclear deal. And a Jewish element of the debate surfaced in the New York Times on Wednesday, August 12th, when the Times ran a huge story about a piece published in the Jewish Forward. The New York Times gave their story the headline, "Reporting from Iran, Jewish paper sees no plot to destroy Israel." The Times story tells how the Forward's assistant managing editor for news, Larry Cohler-Esses, became the first journalist from an American Jewish publication to be given an Iranian visa since 1979, and to then file a story from Iran. And according to the story, Larry found little evidence to suggest that Iran wants to destroy the state of Israel. The New York Times also points out that many American Jews oppose the current Iran nuclear deal because Jews fear Iran's intention to use it to fulfill a dream of wiping Israel off the face of the map. So the Times is suggesting that the story in the Forward undermines that Jewish objection to the Iran nuclear deal. Well, to give us more insight into the Forward story, I'm especially pleased to have on our JBS phones now one of American Jewry's foremost journalists and observers of the American Jewish scene, the wonderful editor-in-chief of the Forward, Jane Eisner. Jane, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome once again to JBS.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Mark.
Thank you. Jane, first, Mazel Tov. Larry did a fabulous job, and the fact that the Forward has made news in the New York Times is obviously good for your paper, but it also adds to the very important discussion and debate on the American scene today. So, Mazel Tov. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Also, Jane, Larry is a superb journalist, and the piece is very well written. I hope everybody takes a real hard look at it. And he weaves in personal stories from those he met during his stay. By the way, we learn he actually stayed in Iran for some time. He was a teacher of English as a second language in Iran. And he begins with, a story of meeting an individual at the tomb of the Persian king Cyrus, and then a woman comes by, and he describes what it was like for her to be so she tried to put flowers on the tomb, and the guards didn't let her do it or didn't like it. My first question for you is, what was the genesis of Larry's trip to Iran? Did this emanate out of some idea at the Forward?
Well, as you mentioned, Mark, Larry has had a long-standing interest in Iran. He spent 2 years there right after he graduated college, back in the 1970s, before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. He speaks some Farsi, some Persian, and has been keeping up with the news there ever since. A couple of years ago, when he actually had tried to interview the new president, Hassan Rouhani, when he came to the United Nations for the first time in September 2013, Larry was told, well, you can't interview the president, but why don't you try to get a visa?
Yes.
And so he did. He applied. We always knew it was a real long shot. He was rejected a couple of times. And then this spring was told that his chances would be improved if he got a letter of support from someone important in Iran, and through a mutual friend was able to be in touch with a former lawmaker, a former member of the Iranian parliament who's a Jewish communal leader there, and who wrote him a letter of support. And it seems, this is what the Iranians told us, that made a big difference.
Interesting.
In his application, and it was finally approved in early July.
Okay, but as editor-in-chief of the Forward, what did you hope Larry could do in terms of, writing something illuminating for your readers? What was the goal?
The goal here was really to try to better understand the Iranian attitudes towards the United States, towards Israel, and towards themselves.
Yes.
And I did not know what he was going to find. He didn't know what he was going to find.
Yes.
I mean, he went there with an open mind, with a long list of people he wanted to speak with. He knew that he wanted to go to Shiraz and Isfahan, in addition to Tehran, because those are the cities where he had lived all those years ago, and also where there are sizable numbers of Jews. And in next week's Forward, we'll have a story about the Jews of Iran.
Uh-huh.
But he was going there to really talk to as many people as he could, from grand ayatollahs to butchers and waiters, and to try to get a sense, as much as one can do in a week, of the pulse of that nation, and to help us understand what they're thinking and what their attitudes are, and whether in learning that, how that will affect our own personal views of the nuclear deal.
Okay. What did you learn as you read his story? And my guess is you edited the story, so you may have even seen more than we, the reader, has seen. But as you read it, and for those who have not yet seen the forward piece, Larry speaks both to the ordinary guy, to the butcher, but he also speaks to many clerics, high-ranking clerics. What, as you read the piece, Jane, did you say, oh, I find this so interesting, I've learned something important?
Well, I think for many of us, the biggest takeaway was that, and the biggest surprise, was that so many Iranians felt free to criticize their government. That is, of course, something that we take for granted here in the United States, but given the theocratic nature of that government and what Larry calls the deep state,
yes,
the sort of police apparatus,
yes,
enforcing that theocracy, he was very surprised at the openness with which people expressed attitudes, not just about the current government, but even about the supreme leader, Khomeini, who has died, but who was the founder of this kind of revolutionary, so-called revolutionary Islamic Republic.
Yes.
So I think that was the biggest surprise. He interviewed a number of very important clerics and found that there was some disagreement over the stated policy of Iran's leadership, which is to deny Israel's existence.
Yes.
And certainly some of the people who he interviewed were close to that really strong statement against Israel. Others said that they could believe in a two-state solution with a Palestinian state as well, if that's what the Palestinians wanted. So there was much more nuance and ambiguity among these clerics than we had expected. I think those were the two, biggest takeaways. As I wrote in my editor's note, if you read this story looking for proof that Iran is really on the brink of positive change, that it's on the road to enlightenment and won't become such an exporter of terror and destruction in the region, you will find proof of that. If you are still very, very concerned that this is a country that is hateful towards the United States and Israel and has only evil designs on its neighbors, you might find support for that too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we really tried our hardest to present as accurately as possible the range of opinion that was there. We didn't go in with an agenda. We just went in to try to tell the story as accurately as possible. And we have great faith that our readers and your viewers and other people who read this will make up their own minds based on what we report.
I want to say again, you did a fabulous job here, and I'm recommending everyone pick up the forward, or you can get it online and read Larry's story. Jane, you entitled the piece that appeared in the forward, "A Jewish Journalist, Exclusive Look inside Iran. The New York Times entitled its piece, "Jewish Paper Sees No Plot to Destroy Israel." How did you feel about the New York Times headline? How accurate did you feel it was? And do you feel that your piece shows that Iran has no plot to destroy Israel?
Oh, well, that's a very hard question. Look, I feel hesitant to criticize another journalistic, outlet, no matter who it is. I think it's fair to say that the Times headline was not a headline that we chose to use. That was not the point that we were trying to make. And I think that what we showed was that, yes, there are people of importance, the clerics who are very much involved or close to the Islamic leadership, who said flat out that they wouldn't want to destroy Israel, that they didn't think that was possible, as much as they still criticize, especially Israeli policies. But, as readers will find for themselves, there are also some who were much less benign and felt that Israel shouldn't exist.
Yes.
So, I'd rather the story speak for itself than the New York Times headline.
Okay. By the way, that was a very classy and politic answer, but I'm not in the same position you are, so I want to give you my sense. Then you won't speak about the Times. You just respond to my sense. My feeling was that your title was much more accurate, and that when one reads the story as it appears in the foreword, it's just a fascinating look, more of what the street of Iran feels. And I thought your point a moment ago, that what was so striking was that despite the fact that if you put flowers on Cyrus's tomb, the guards come over and tell you can't do that, and they did it in a very police state manner. At the same time, Larry had no trouble evoking from the average Iranian that he met with and spoke very candid remarks about everything, life in Iran, how they feel about America. Many of them had very little sense of what America really was doing and what's going on in America and what the deal really is about, but to the extent to which they had a thought, they were very willing to share it with him. Then he does speak to some mullahs who, again, basically say, look, we make a distinction between Jews and the Zionist entity, and if the Zionist entity makes peace with the Palestinians, it's fine with us. But, Jane, Larry's point about there being three elements in Iran: the people, the government, and again, what you referred to a moment ago, the deep state. The deep state is something scary, and the deep state is not something Larry got to speak to. So that the deep state is the one with which the Obama administration is trying to make out some kind of negotiated deal over the Iran nuclear program. And I didn't feel Larry gave us any insight to merit the Times saying, oh, look, the forward sends a journalist there, and the journalist finds that Iran doesn't want to destroy Israel. Larry didn't get to talk to those who are controlling the deep state element of Iran, and that so until the deep state tells Larry in some credible fashion, we have no desire to destroy the Jewish state. I'm not sure the Times should have fashioned its story about your story in that way. Is there anything you can say comfortably about my own comments?
You're a very astute observer of journalism.
All right, we'll leave it there. What gives you most optimism and most hope in terms of the Iran nuclear deal as a result of your reading the story? After you come away from everything you read that Larry writes, and again, you've seen part 2 already. Is there anything you can share with our audience that gives you, some real sense of optimism going forward with the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, I haven't as yet editorialized on the deal. I
know.
will
Right.
before the congressional consideration of it in September. So I'm not prepared to say whether or not the Forward will endorse it or not. I do think, though, that the story it conclusively shows that our caricature of Iran as a monolithic police state in which only one line of thought is expressed is just not true.
Yes.
There still may be reasons to oppose this deal, and there are certainly reasons to worry about Iran's behavior towards its own citizens and towards other actors in the Middle East. It didn't suddenly become a Jeffersonian democracy here.
Of course.
But I think that we have been told over and over again that Iran is like Nazi Germany in 1939, or implied Iran is like the Soviet Union in the bad old days, and that's not the case. It still may be a country that we shouldn't deal with, that we shouldn't trust. People can come to that conclusion. But I think that we have to recognize that it's being falsely painted, something that it's not, and that I only can say, after Larry's experience there, after his experience reporting and hearing what Iranians had to say.
By the way, the only thing I would say that only a slight disagreement is that I have never heard people disparage the Iranian people. In fact, I've heard the opposite. I've heard many people say, the Iranian people are bright and lovely. There's a Jewish presence in Iran, and that they're not really anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, that this is a problem with, again, what Larry calls the deep state. And that was also true, I believe, with the former Soviet Union. The people of Russia were the people of the former Soviet Union. We had to worry about the maniacs in the Kremlin, and we did a good job of that. What I hear is we have some maniacs who are in charge of the state and who don't give the people, as you call it, a Jeffersonian democratic experience, and that in the end, the issue is not whether the butcher wants to destroy Israel. The question is, are those who are in real power want to destroy Israel? And I don't feel that your piece even pretended to answer that question, despite what the New York Times said. And, so is there any comment?
That's fair enough. I mean, look, we did quote Khomeini, we quoted Rouhani, we in public statements that they had made, because we couldn't interview them.
Yes.
Certainly we made a request, but
Sure.
it's obviously not something that's easy to satisfy. And I think that that is the great unknown. But I think it's also fair to say that while this deep state is deeply entrenched and powerful, it is not entirely immune from public pressure. And that's why, in 2009, when Ahmadinejad basically stole the election there was a great uproar and marches and all that sort of thing. And then there was a terrible crackdown.
Yes.
And the deep state asserted itself. But, as Larry explains in the story, it's pretty clear that they were chastened by that, because in 2013, when Rouhani, who ran as a reformer, as a moderate, who said that he wanted to negotiate with the United States and other powers about the nuclear situation, when he was the surprise winner of that election, they let it happen, the deep state, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
Yes.
It's not a system that, thankfully, we have to live under. But it is not entirely immune to
Yes.
public pressure. The question is, as you rightly say, how responsive will it be to a populace that seems to have other things on its mind before going to eliminate Israel?
I say it again, Jane, you did fabulous. You're always doing fabulous work, but this is a special piece of fabulous work. Kol hakavod to you. Kol hakavod to Larry, the entire forward. Sam, tell him I'm thrilled with the work he's doing. And I thank you so much for sharing time with me. You know how much I love you, and you have to be on all the time, Jane.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you, too. Good questions.
Thank you very much, dear. Jane Eisner, Editor-in-Chief of The Forward. Before we close, I want to express one profound concern I have about the way in which the Iran deal is being discussed on the American scene in general and in the Jewish community in particular. There is a willingness on both sides to demonize and to vilify, to say the harshest, nastiest things imaginable, ad hominem attacks of the worst sort, aimed at those with whom one disagrees, on both sides. Those who support the deal accuse those who oppose it with being anti-Obama. It happened to me on the recent roundtable discussion, where the fact that I have criticisms of the way the United States negotiated with the Iranians, criticisms which liberal journalist Thomas Friedman, hardly one who's anti-Obama, also expressed in a television interview with Charlie Rose. But the fact that I'm critical of the way the Secretary of State negotiated with the Iranians prompted the suggestion that I am anti-Obama. There's nothing fair or intelligent in that kind of criticism. And the president is unfortunately guilty of the same type of rhetoric, where he deprecates those who oppose the deal by stating that the only reason someone would oppose it is that either they are uninformed, in essence ignorant, or they are ideologically predisposed against any diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear problem. There's no sense that someone who opposes the deal might actually have valid, thoughtful, cogent reasons for their opposition. No. To this way of thinking, opponents of the plan must be uninformed ideologues who think that war is the only option. And this approach cuts off all discussion and civil debate. But it's not just those who support the deal who are guilty of this intellectual myopia and are prone to irrational ad hominem attacks. Those who believe the Iran deal poses a terrible threat to this nation and to the state of Israel also are willing to vilify those who support the deal as being spineless appeasers at best, and at worst, they're anti-Israel, even anti-Semitic, even anti-American. And it's just an unfair thing to demonize those who support the deal, just as it's inappropriate to vilify people who oppose it. It is possible for good, intelligent, thoughtful people to agree on the overarching goal, but to disagree on how best to achieve that goal. That really is possible. And that's what I really see this debate and controversy to be all about. How do people who agree that Iran should never get nuclear weapons, how do they debate U.S. strategy to achieve the best possible outcome of this goal? And that's what interests me. That's what we're trying to highlight here on JBS. I believe there is a consensus among most Americans on the goal, which President Obama has articulated very well and very clearly. The goal is to prevent Iran from ever getting nuclear weapons and to achieve this goal without going to war. At the same time, if any military action is required to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, the president has said that the United States will use military force, will go to war if it has to. If it has to stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. That's the president's position. There's no disagreement about the goal. The disagreement comes in terms of strategy. What's the best strategy? How do we pressure Iran so that it will never get nuclear weapons? The president and those who agree with him argue that the current deal will do the trick just fine. This is what the president's saying over and over. And then there are those who disagree with the president. For example, New York Senator, Democrat Chuck Schumer, who argues that the current deal will do the exact opposite, will pave the way over time to Iran's getting a nuclear weapon. And all of us should be anxious to hear representatives of these two opposing views engage in honest, forthright, civil debate in which each side has the opportunity to state their case and then to hear an intelligent rebuttal where one exists. You know, there's a profound rabbinic principle in the Talmud which expresses the idea that in an argument, there tends to be some truth on both sides. In Hebrew, the Talmud says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, the meaning of which is, these and these are both the words of the living God. The insight of the Jewish tradition is that in debate, both positions often carry divine truth, and each side can learn from the other, and certainly merit respect of one another. This approach is what is sadly missing in the debate over the Iran nuclear deal. Both sides should stop demonizing and vilifying the other, and should assume their opponents have the same high motives they do, that everyone has the same goal of keeping Iran from getting nuclear weapons in as peaceful a way as possible, and that we all listen and engage and respond to the other's strategy, and that we then arrive at our own thoughtful and responsible position on this matter. And here at JBS, we'll continue to do the best we can to provide you with thoughtful, intelligent information free of ad hominem attacks. And I hope you appreciate the service JBS is providing to the American Jewish community and to all Americans who turn to this channel for news, information, and analysis that is unique on the American television scene. As always, my thanks to Sloan Copeland, our director, Serge Goldberg, our program coordinator, to the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and to the producer of this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. I'll be away this coming week with my entire family on vacation. I hope all of you have a most enjoyable and restful end to your summer. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.